Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into an epic 3-century saga. We're talking about the Wayside Inn, America's oldest continuously operating inn. It's a story of fire, poetry, and relentless hospitality. We're going to explore how a simple roadside tavern helped shape the American identity, became a playground for an eccentric billionaire, and somehow, miraculously, survived a freezing winter night to remain standing today. Part 1. Trial by freezing fire. To really grasp the significance of this incredible piece of Americana, we have to start on the night it was almost erased from existence forever. The date, December 21st, 1955. Picture this. A beautiful wedding reception had just wrapped up in the spacious North Ballroom. But outside, New England was gripped by a brutal cold snap. Temperatures had plummeted way, way down, eventually hitting an absolutely unforgiving -16 degrees. And things went south fast. At 2 a.m., a night watchman catches a whiff of smoke near the boiler room. Literally before anyone could react, the entire north wing is completely engulfed in roaring flames. Firefighters from all over rushed in, but they hit an immediate, terrifying wall. The nearest hydrant is over a mile away, and the local water source, Josephine Pond, is locked under 16 solid inches of ice. So imagine crews in the freezing pitch black, desperately swinging axes, frantically chopping through 1.5 feet of ice just to get a single drop of water to fight this massive blaze. When the sun finally came up, the aftermath was just heartbreaking. There was this glistening cascade of frozen water coating the main staircase like a literal glacier. Priceless colonial antiques were either scorched black or completely entombed in ice. The fire chief took one look at the wreckage, estimated $200,000 in structural damage, and officially declared the centuries-old building a total loss. Think about this. Over 1 million gallons of water had been pumped onto that inferno overnight. Staring at the charred, icy skeleton of the building in the harsh morning light, locals literally wept. I mean, it genuinely looked like 300 years of living history had just been washed away into the mud forever. Part 2, Colonial Taverns and Revolutions. Now, to understand exactly what was at stake in those freezing ashes and why the community refused to let it go, we have to flash back to the very beginning, way before the United States was even a country. The story kicks off in 1716. Massachusetts is still just a British colony, and a guy named David Howe gets a license to keep a house of entertainment for tired travelers. Flash forward to 1746, his son Ezekiel takes the reins and renames it the Red Horse Tavern. But Ezekiel wasn't just serving drinks and roast mutton. In 1775, he actively leads the Sudbury militia to Concord, answering Paul Revere's famous alarm right at the spark of the Revolutionary War. You've got to remember, travel back then was rough. Dirt roads, no highways, zero modern communication. So places like Howe's Tavern, they were the literal social network of the colonial era. It provided food and shelter for weary horseback travelers, sure, but it was also where regional news was exchanged, merchant business meetings happened, and intense political debates raged. Imagine farmers trading crop secrets by the hearth, while wealthy merchants whispered about British troop movements in the dark corners. Information flowed through that tavern just as freely as the ale. Part 3. Longfellow's literary landmark. As the 19th century rolled in with canals and railroads, you'd think an old, slow stagecoach stop would become obsolete, right? Instead, it transformed into a powerful cultural muse. When the famous poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow visited with his publisher in 1862, he didn't find a bustling revolutionary hub. What he found was, in his own words, a rambling, tumble-down building, 200 years old, and till now in the family of the Howes. It was peaceful, rustic, and just completely steeped in memories. And Longfellow really needed that peace. He was reeling from the horrific, tragic death of his wife in a fire, all against the agonizing daily backdrop of the Civil War. So he used the tavern's quiet charm as the setting for his 1863 poetry collection, Tales of a Wayside Inn. He pictured a group of friends seeking refuge, sharing stories around the tavern fire, a collection that famously included his legendary poem, Paul Revere's Ride. Well, the book was a massive runaway hit. Practically overnight, this sleepy local spot was elevated into a global literary landmark. Part 4. Henry Ford's historical vision. Eventually, this newfound literary fame caught the eye of an eccentric billionaire with a very specific, grandiose vision for American history. Enter automobile pioneer Henry Ford, who bought the property in 1923. But Ford didn't just want to run a hotel, he wanted to freeze time entirely. He poured his massive resources into creating a living, breathing museum of early New England life. We're talking expanding the property to a staggering 3,000 acres, relocating the historic Redstone Schoolhouse in 1925, building a fully functioning grist mill that ground real flour in 1929, and even constructing the beautiful Martha Mary Chapel in 1940 using wood from trees knocked down by a devastating hurricane. Now, Ford's historical obsession did spark a pretty fascinating debate that's still going on today. When he moved that Redstone Schoolhouse, he heavily promoted it as the true birthplace of the nursery rhyme Mary Had a Little Lamb, claiming a 10-year-old boy named John Rollstone wrote it in 1815. On the flip side, most historians and literary scholars point to Sarah Josepha Hale, who published the poem in 1830 and is historically recognized as the true author. We're certainly not picking sides here, but it's honestly a bit amusing to see how someone with that much wealth could literally build their preferred version of history right onto the physical landscape. So that brings us right back to the crucial hinge point of our story. Returning to those smoking, ice-covered ruins in 1955, we have to ask a fundamental question. When disaster strikes, how do you survive without losing the very soul of what makes you historic? Part 5, Rising from the Ashes. The local community looked at the charred beams of that 1955 fire and made a swift, defiant decision. They were absolutely not going to let this place become just another lost memory in a history book. Armed with a quote from Henry Ford himself, "Nothing that is good ever dies," a newly formed citizens committee launched a massive, nationwide letter-writing campaign. They pleaded with the Ford Foundation that this wasn't just a building, it was irreplaceable American heritage. And it worked. Letters poured in from everyday citizens, prominent businessmen, even U.S. presidents, creating an overwhelming, undeniable mounting of public support to rebuild. And that desperate effort paid off spectacularly. Just 64 days after the fire, which is an insanely fast turnaround in historical preservation, the Ford Foundation announced a massive $500,000 grant to resurrect the inn. And they wouldn't just patch it up with modern drywall. It would be meticulously restored using traditional methods to save its deep, colonial soul. Part 6. 3 Centuries of Hospitality. Today, the painstakingly restored building stands as a physical testament to both survival and unyielding community dedication. Being the oldest continuously operating inn in the United States is no small feat. Through the turmoil of the American Revolution, the rise of industrialization, the monumental shift from horses to cars, and of course, devastating icy fires, the doors of the Wayside Inn have never permanently closed to travelers. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? When you walk through a 300-year-old doorway, are you just checking into a room or stepping into the journey of a nation? The next time you travel, think about what invisible histories you might be joining when you cross an ancient threshold. Thank you for tuning in for this explainer, and keep exploring the history right in your own backyard.